The sky was no longer ours. The ships above weren't the first visitors, but the first invaders. And as their shadow fell over Earth, humanity had to make a choice: resist or surrender to the unknown. It began on a quiet Tuesday morning. No one expected it. Not the scientists, not the military, and certainly not the average person just going about their day. The skies grew dark, like the sun was being swallowed by a storm. But it wasn't a storm. It was something else entirely. The first signs of something wrong came from the weather. Strange fluctuations, temperatures dropping and rising at impossible rates, as if the atmosphere itself was being tampered with. Then came the silence. Cities that were once filled with the hum of life fell eerily quiet. No birds, no traffic, no wind. Just stillness. And then they appeared, giant, black ships, hovering above the world's major cities. People screamed in panic, tried to flee, but there was nowhere to go. These ships weren't like anything anyone had ever seen. They were massive, darker than the night sky, and they emitted a low, thrumming sound that sent chills down the spine of every person within earshot. The air grew heavier as if the world itself was holding its breath. Communication with governments was cut off. Military forces mobilized, but they couldn't get close enough to engage. These invaders seemed untouchable. Their ships were impervious to anything humanity could throw at them. The entire world was paralyzed, caught between fear and confusion. In the midst of this chaos, a small group of scientists, led by Dr. Emily Hayes, was determined to make sense of what was happening. Emily was a woman of logic, someone who believed in finding solutions through science, and she wasn't about to give in to the fear gripping the world. She gathered a team of experts, engineers, physicists, linguists, and even a few military strategists, and set out to study the ships. But the more they learned, the less they understood. There was no indication of any communication coming from the invaders. They didn't speak, they didn't move, they just watched. Days passed, and the invaders showed no signs of aggression, but they didn't leave either. It was as if they were waiting, observing. Humanity, in its terror, had no idea what to do. Governments tried to negotiate, but the invaders didn't respond. And then, suddenly, the first of the ships opened. A single, wide panel split apart, revealing a faint glow. People stared up in awe and fear, unsure whether this was an offer of peace or a prelude to something worse. No one knew. Then, the signals began. Strange patterns of lights, shapes, and sounds emerged from the ships. It was as if the invaders were trying to communicate. Emily and her team were the first to decipher the signals. They weren't words in any language they knew, but there were patterns, repeated frequencies, and some semblance of order. Emily believed this was not a threat but a message, one that humanity had to decode if they were to survive. But what did they want? And why hadn't they attacked? Weeks passed, and the tension only grew. Humanity had no answers. Governments struggled to maintain order, but the longer the ships hovered, the more society began to unravel. People lived in constant fear, wondering when the other shoe would drop. Was this just a warning, or was something far worse on the horizon? As Emily's team continued their work, they noticed a pattern in the signals, a message that seemed to repeat every 24 hours. It wasn't just random noise. It was intelligent. Methodical. It was a message they could decipher, but it took time. And when they finally cracked it, the message was simple yet terrifying: we are the conquerors. You are the experiment. The ships weren't here to destroy humanity, not yet. They were studying us, testing us. And they had been doing so for years, even before their arrival on Earth. What had seemed like random disruptions in the weather, strange disappearances, unexplained phenomena, these were all part of their plan. They had been gathering data, learning our weaknesses, preparing for their invasion. As Emily processed this, she realized the depth of the situation. The invaders had been manipulating events on Earth, feeding off human chaos, slowly orchestrating the downfall of civilization. But why hadn't they revealed themselves before now? The answer came to Emily in a moment of clarity: they needed to see how we would react to an unknown force. They needed to test our responses, to determine if we were worth the effort of conquering. And then the world learned the truth. One of the ships descended. slowly, methodically, as if it were making its way to Earth's surface. Panic spread. People thought this was it, the end. But when the ship landed, it didn't unleash an army. Instead, it opened, and a single figure emerged. A humanoid figure. Tall, with skin that shimmered like glass, eyes glowing with an unnatural light. It didn't speak at first. It simply looked at the gathering crowd. Then, in a voice that resonated deep within the minds of those around it, it said, "We have watched you long enough. Now we will see how you act." This was a test, but it was also a warning. The invaders weren't interested in mere subjugation. They wanted something more, a deeper understanding of humanity's capacity for survival, for unity, and for resistance. They would not simply invade. They would provoke, challenge, and test us. And the world, in turn, would have to respond. At this moment, Emily realized that the fate of humanity rested on a single question. Could we come together in the face of this threat? Could we fight back, or would we crumble under the pressure? As the invaders continued their experiments, they didn't just watch. They intervened in subtle ways, altering small events to see how humanity would respond. A city would face a power outage, and the people would have to cooperate to survive. A natural disaster would strike, and the invaders would watch to see if people helped one another or if they turned on each other. Emily's team began to suspect that the invaders were using these events to make their decision. If humanity showed signs of breaking, of turning to violence and division, then they would be deemed unworthy. If we showed resilience, unity, and intelligence, we might have a chance to coexist with them. But Emily knew that time was running out. The world's governments were on the brink of collapse. People were losing hope, and fear had taken root in every corner of the globe. But then, a glimmer of hope emerged from an unexpected source. One of the invaders, who had been studying humanity's response, began to communicate directly with Emily. It wasn't a peaceful negotiation, but it was an opportunity. Through a series of cryptic messages, Emily learned that the invaders had an ulterior motive. They were not simply conquering Earth, they were fleeing a threat far greater than anything humanity could imagine. The invaders needed Earth's resources, its technology, and its people to survive. They were running from something far more dangerous, something that would wipe them out if they failed. The decision was clear: humanity could fight and risk losing everything, or they could join the invaders in their struggle against an enemy even more powerful. But how could they trust the invaders, who had shown no mercy, no compassion? How could they work together with those who had brought fear and destruction to their world? In the end, it came down to one question: would humanity continue to fight for survival, or would they allow fear to dictate their future? The answer came not in the form of a victory, but in a choice. A choice to unite and face the unknown together, as one world, as one people, with the hope that survival could be achieved not through war, but through cooperation.